Emotional regulation is one of those things that's like the most important. We all have feelings. Feelings are not facts, famously. They are irrational and they are temporary, and if you're not planning for them and don't expect them, they can be really strong, and they can, they can ruin your whole life, really, and actually really easily, because it only takes one really bad choice. You get real mad, pull a gun and shoot somebody, that ruins your life. Uh, or in much smaller ways normally, like being short with your spouse over a period of time and whatever, or being, you know what I mean, in any relationship. If you can't control your feelings and you act out and do stuff, addiction, all kinds of stuff. I have historically had bad control of my emotions. Like, I, I am. It's the same thing that makes me so sensitive to other people's feelings that makes it really hard for me to, um, control my emotions. I try to manage them, um, regardless of your health level. It can do that. So you can be really healthy and in recovery and church and therapy and everything else for years. You can still have trouble managing your emotions, and they can still ruin your life. If you're already watching this video on purpose, then you're already aware and want to, improve. Probably because you've had some like interactions or felt some kind of ways after losing your temper, or something happened and it affected you and or others, and you want to not do that again. That's why I am still working on mine. Those can be relationship stuff, just like having arguments with people or whatever, or it can be, a job you lost, or any kind of consequence where you were like, all right, yeah, that, like, I wish that hadn't happened. How can I not do that again? You will hear a lot of times in recovery and in churches and stuff that you can't be anxious or mad or scared or whatever, and also be grateful. And the truth is that it's not like you get really anxious and then you be like, I'm grateful, and all of a sudden you're not anxious anymore. I assume people know that. It's inversely proportional. As one goes up, the other goes down. So if you get really anxious and then you start being grateful, if you be grateful enough for long enough, it will go away. But the two do coexist at some point. The reason that it is like that is because that is how our nervous system was designed by God, is what I say now. For a lot of my life, I thought it was that way because of evolution and, science and stuff. And I majored in physics and math and economics. So, like, I am a scientist, basically. And all those years, I was very jealous of religious people. I was judgmental. Like, how can you possibly, like, you know, do what some book says? And, people have, it's all things people have done. And I have, I don't feel that way anymore. I guess that's obvious by being a Christian now. But like those rage houses where you get mad and go in and destroy a bunch of stuff, uh, the venting your emotions by punching a pillow. The reason that kind of stuff doesn't work, and that doesn't mean that it never works, but the reason that it doesn't work is because when you do that, you put your brain in a state of, violence and anger and whatnot, and you indulge it. So it wants to continue doing that. So then you just have to fight even harder to stop. You know, there is an argument for venting pressure and stuff, but I don't make that argument anymore because I see that maybe sometimes or whatever, but it does seem the other way, that if you scream into a pillow, that you're actually just making the problem worse. You're multiplying it by however much. It might be a tiny little bit, might not be able to tell. Over years of learning behavior and copying behavior and doing things that you didn't really know why, but then doing it lots of times and then having to later figure out the reasons and stuff like that. For all of that type of complicated stuff, wherever you're at today, it's a combination of, you know, how it started and then all the things that happened along the way. But basically, it's a behavior that has been repeated enough times that it turns into a habit. And a habit means that the neural pathway in your brain is so well worn that it just defaults to that, basically, without even asking a question: do I want to have this feeling or behavior? It just does. And, if you fight off that feeling that you shouldn't, or the guilt or whatever, for so long, eventually it'll go away. It's like a callus. We talk about that in Christianity, obviously, with hands and stuff. I thought that God intentionally made it look like evolution, and I think that there are a lot of things that science and religion, it appears they're saying different things, but it's just because it's two different angles looking at the same thing. And as we all know, how you can look at a building from one side and somebody else can look at on the shadow side of the building, and it doesn't look the same at all, but it's the same building. They're both just systems of belief and explanation. I don't have answers for how it can look like this but be like this. And I'm trying to kind of figure that out as I go. All I know is, that I have been born again, and all of the details and beliefs and history and all that stuff I don't have all figured out. I'm still a baby Christian. Our nervous system is built the way that whatever it's doing is what it wants to continue doing, or do more of, or do better, or more often, or whatever. But when you ignore the voice of God for long enough, you start to not hear it anymore. And so it's kind of like that, but a little different with neural pathways. You have to practice something a lot for it to become a habit. So just like there are good habits, there are bad habits. So you can intentionally make a good habit the way that you accidentally make a bad habit. But you're just conditioning your brain to do a certain thing, either automatically or not automatically. The neural pathway thing, a good analogy that I had while I was writing my notes for this actually was, it's very much like a rut in a carpet. Well, it's like how a rut gets there. You walk back and forth on a place in a carpet and it starts to be worn. If in that analogy you were like a beach ball and you would roll in the rut automatically without going somewhere else, then it would be the same. So, the rut gets worn and then it's easier to go into it automatically. And you don't ask. Like, the brain will, if it's trained to, it will do things automatically. And that is to minimize the stress on itself, so it doesn't have to decide over and over again. So, that's a feature of human. Your brain will do some things automatically, and you can hack that to have those be on purpose, or stop having ones that you're doing by accident. So basically, not being beholden to it, but taking advantage of it. That's the goal. And with emotional regulation, it's pretty obvious how that would work. Like, say your spouse says something to you that you think is, say you respond with anger enough times to a person that you start responding with anger automatically. Yeah, that's not a great example, but that's the kind of thing. If you have a feeling of anger and you express anger at a person, and then you do it 50 more times, then you'll start expressing anger automatically. Whereas it was that you had to learn to express the anger. Most of these things happen when we are children. A lot of this stuff gets set up the home that we grow up in, the home that we, until you're a certain age, you don't have awareness. And then you don't really have understanding awareness. But from a certain age on, like wherever that happens, where you start remembering and being aware and understanding, so that's kind of like where your life began. So your initial environment for where your life began, i.e., the home you grew up in, is where you learn most of these things, both the broad and the specific. The more chaotic and unstable and unsafe your childhood is, the harder most of those things will have been or will be to change. So there's bad news in some of this. It's kind of like you could be finding out for the first time that so I'm the way I am because I basically trained myself to be by accident. And that can easily seem very impossible to do anything about. I know, because it seems impossible to me frequently. But if you start small and just start something that you try to do differently, you'll start to see that you start to get a little bit of daylight of control about it. Like, it's a really good idea when you start to feel any kind of dysregulation, like your skin getting hot or anxiety, racing heart, all of, if you're already aware of that kind of thing, that's good. If not, you have to try to, that's kind of another video, but the bad news has inversely good news. Because yes, it is hard to get better. It is certainly very hard to get really good at it, and it is not possible to get perfect at it. The good news is once you start making a little progress, you start to see that it's not as hard as it seems, and then it actually gets easier. And then you start having the ability to just, like, if you want a new habit, you just start having it. If you want to think or start thinking in a different way or reacting in a different way, you decide to, and then you make it that way. So the good news is that you do have control over these things in the long term. So if you use a disciplined method to consistently start at least one thing, for most people it's expressing anger. Anger management class is a lot of what I am talking about. I mean, so if it's anger expressing, or saying things you regret that are mean, or something like that, then you can come up with a, I'm going to, when I start to feel this way, I'm going to isolate. I'm going to get in a safer place or a more alone place, and I'm going to either pray or meditate or read a certain thing or listen to relaxing music or something. And the more that you do that, the more you'll notice that it gets better. And understand that, like, the first 100 or so times I tried to do something like that, there was zero success. And it took a bunch of times of having, like, 5 seconds of success to start being able to have times that were like half a minute, in order to, you know what I mean? It's very, very gradual. It feels like failure pretty much the whole time, because even when you make progress, you can only measure it as it's not as bad as the time before. So even when you make progress, it doesn't feel like progress. But when you go back and reflect, which is why journaling and, meditating and things like that are so critical, because you have to have like little points of, where you kind of reassess and decide what's working and what's not, and do more of the things that are working and less of the things that aren't. And I am like barely along in this journey, like barely. And I've been safe for a little over a year and in recovery for a while before that. And, you know, I actually feel like it's getting a little worse, but I know it's just because I'm paying more attention and trying more things that feel like I'm failing at. So, I'm trying to document the journey, I guess. I'm trying to make videos for people that are about where I'm at a little before, that I've gone a little farther than, just like I watch videos of people that have gone farther than me. And, there aren't many people I've gone farther than, because I'm at the very beginning. But if you want to kind of like, I'm going to be trying to make topical in that way videos. So, like, things that I'm doing and trying to do that I'm having a little bit of success with, I'm going to be trying to make videos about that. And I'm not at all claiming that I'm really good at any of this stuff. Sometimes I learn better from people that are just barely ahead of me, because they know some stuff I don't know, but they don't be way ahead. And so I don't have that separation of wondering if, it's easy for them or whatever, that kind of stuff. So if you want to follow me in that, I'm trying to use AI and also start a business, and also learning some instruments, as well as song arranging and production. There's a lot of stuff. Some of it I'm probably trying to do too much. Other of it, it's good I'm busy, and other parts of it are, they're good for me to be doing. So, like I need to. So, if you want to follow me along in that, if you got ideas for stuff, I don't know who would be watching a video of mine still at this point, this far in. But if you are watching this, then you are my hero and the person I'm making these videos for. I hope somebody sees this part of this video at some point. You know what I mean? I don't, I'm trying to not at all worry about progress or views or subscribers or any of that stuff. I'm trying to kind of, simplify, buckle down, and make videos for people that are where I was at a month ago, approximately. And, you know, I have a lot of like angles that I look at things from, and I'm definitely kind of weird, neurodivergent and all that stuff. I could go through a little of my story. I had a bad acid trip when I was 19. It I was pretty smart already, but it unlocked this thing, and I majored in math, physics, and economics, and like ended up trying to self-medicate, and had some addiction stuff, and like it's been a whole long crazy thing. But I have a wife and son. I'm 46. I am trying to I'm trying to be who God sees me as and wants me to be. I'm, I've got a lot of, like insecurities and talents, and, you know, I'm just trying to do it like the next guy, I'm no special. I've been doing and trying to do this kind of thing for a long time, and I hope I have experiences and perspectives that will help some people, and I hope some people that need that help see the videos I'm making. I would absolutely love to have a community, active community of, like neurodivergent, overthinking, over analytical, I could go on. But I think when my people see me, like, people that are like me see me in videos, they will see that I'm a like one of them. So I hope you're one of those. And I really hope this video helped you and or somebody else. Um, Thank you very much for watching, especially to this far. And that is where I'm going to drop it. So until next time, this side or the other, peace out.